Hello and welcome back to all of the returning listeners. And if you're new here, well, we're glad you're joining us in this virtual world. Either way, y'all are tuning in to season 2 of Whether You Like It or Not, a Toronto-based podcast that started right out of Jane and Finch. I'm your host, Moody, a multi-ethnic Latina with many interests, as you'll learn through the episodes in this season. Join us in this safe, inclusive space as guests and I share meaningful experiences and engage in typically unspoken dialogues along with all sorts of babosadas. I think it's fair to say this is where we get comfortable with being a little uncomfortable, whether you like it or not. Okay, we could get started. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Whether You Like It or Not. I want to say thank you to whoever is a returning listener for lending me your ears, lending me your time, and allowing us to connect with you through our voices. Whether you're a returning listener or a new person here, it is the first time I am recording in a really long time, so bear with me. Hopefully I get the audio down right and we're not, getting some static on your receiving end of the speaker. So I'm really excited for today's episode. I think we've been trying to get this going for what has it been, like a month or two now? Yeah, okay. We had to reschedule, but you are actually the first person that I haven't even recorded in here at all. I don't know if I shared that with you just before when we were talking. Yeah, for sure. So I think maybe we can start off with introducing ourselves. So today I have with me Joli. She is going to be my first guest in a really long time. I don't think I've recorded in over a year or about a year or so, which, it means I'm a little rusty, I think, with my words, but hopefully we get this going in an organic way that is genuine to the experience. So Joli and I know each other because she is my honey's cousin on his mom's side, if I'm not mistaken. His dear mother, Soraya, my daughter, she's actually named after her, and it's bittersweet to have you here. Junior, every time he talks about you guys, he gets really emotional. Yeah, so I know that, I think you're a fitting person to have this conversation with because our family in itself, on an entire level and on an individual level, I think is healing. Not only ourselves, but I think also trying to support each other through that healing. Yeah. So I think it would be really great for you to introduce yourself, maybe share a little bit about what you dedicate most of your day-to-day to, career path, your background, and basically just tell the people who is Joli.
For sure. First of all, thank you for having me. Obviously, it's meant to be. Today was the day that I had the opportunity to come and for us to have this conversation regarding the topic that we're going to discuss. My name is Joli. I am married. I have 2 wonderful children, which I call the miracle of love for both of them. And I am from the Dominican Republic. I am Muriel's husband's cousin through the mom's side that she mentioned. We were really close with her, so she lives very dearly in our heart and in our memories. And as right now, I do work at a hearing clinic as an administrator, but I did go to school for ECE. And right now, my day-to-day consists of, being a present mom, going to work, being present as well for my family, and investing the time in my marriage and taking care of the blessings that the Lord has blessed me with on a day-to-day basis. And I love to share experiences, things that I've lived through, to be able to help others that maybe have gone through the same thing or similar things that I have gone through, and also uplift others because I feel that there's a lot of people that need that on the day-to-day basis.
That's a beautiful introduction. You did that so much better than I could have done it. So I always love when people share who they are from their perspective and what it is that makes them them. So thank you for that. Yeah, it's around 9 o'clock. in Toronto on a Friday night. And when you've got kids and a family, and even an extended family, I think that you are so connected to, incredibly connected to. I think you had family in from the States recently. Are they still here?
No, they left. They came for a few days.
Okay. And so even that, Junior went, came back, and he was, I don't even know, like in otro mundo. He was like on a high. He was,
on a family level.
yeah, literally. And I was reading something today. It's so interesting you said that. I read something today that it's, I don't know if you believe in like energies and auras, but it said people who have like this, it's something about this immense love in your heart. Like when you feel that in your physical body, you exert that energy. And that's literally what an aura is. And when he came home from being with you guys, even if it was a few hours that he was there?
Then it wasn't like not even an hour.
Really? Okay. So however long it was, he was como que like re-energized or...
It's funny you say that because his mom used to love him, and my mom were inseparable. So she used to love to visit there.
Oh, wow.
She used to have sleepovers. My mom.
As an adult?
As an adult.
Oh, shoot. I didn't know that.
So it's that love and joy that we would, that kind of unites us. And, and I'm so glad that he went that day. I was so happy to see.
Yeah, I was really happy for him. I was like, I'm sorry, we couldn't come, but Beba was a little sick. I don't know if he told you.
He did tell me.
So she's still kind of getting over that. But I think it was really great for him in so many ways. He was like, yeah. Anyways, he was like on a whole different level that day and for the rest of, I think, that evening. So thank you for inviting him. I just want to say, your time is golden. When you have kids, when you have family that you care for and that you're there for and you're very involved with, it's invaluable, the time that we have, because we don't know, right? Like what's going to happen. And so thanks for being here and for wanting to be part of this journey with me. It's amazing to, yeah, I'm excited too. I love that I can invite family and friends and, maybe even in the future, people that I genuinely don't know, but it makes it so much more meaningful for me having people that maybe aren't in my immediate family, but are part of that extended family. And in a way, I think us doing this brings me a little bit closer to Junior, and it brings me a little bit closer to you and your family, and it helps me understand you as a person. It helps us connect a little bit, like this is our time. There's no kids, there's no man, there's no interruptions, there's no distractions. So it's one of the reasons why having this space for me was so important, to continue recording and continue podcasting. Because imagínate que estuvieras en la casa right now at my home, right? Like, yeah, literally, that's what it would be. And, my son is there and Junior's there and she's there. My mom comes in and out of the house. And so it's a totally different type of vibe. Whereas we're here and the silence allows us to really sit in this moment, and it allows us to really sit with our thoughts. And I just feel like it's nice to be able to have a date with somebody that's outside of the home space.
100%. I totally agree.
As I mentioned, you're the second guest on the podcast that I have ever. It's been a little bit slow because, again, finding an appropriate environment to welcome people into, I think, has been really, really important for me. And it is one of the things that I really want to build the podcast on. Like, the foundation for me, necesita ser welcoming you into an environment where you can speak freely and not lose your train of thought. So as I pick up, I think back from a hiatus, personally, I think it's going to be on a strong note, because the conversation for today is going to be on something I think a lot of us can relate to in one way or another. Whether you are a parent, whether you are a mom or a dad or a caregiver, or someone who's just trying to figure out how to explore these spaces when it comes to trauma, healing, and boundaries. So Joli actually suggested this topic of conversation I really want to highlight what it is that you want to share throughout our conversation today. And I think one of the ways that we can start off is by sharing a disclaimer. I am going to also share a trigger notice, and then we will get into defining what trauma, healing, and boundaries are based off of literal definitions that I've come across on the internet. I kind of went over this with her, but I'm just sharing this so that people listening kind of know what to expect before we get into it. And then we're going to share, I think, on our personal experiences. And I have a few questions for Joli. So vamos a ver cómo se desarrolla la conversación, because things happen.
Yep.
And exactly. So as always, I'm not a professional in this subject. I think Joli and I are going to be sharing our opinions based on our own experiences. You might have a bit more training, formal training than I do when it comes to trauma, healing, and that sort of scope, because you did mention you are an ECE. So I think we're sharing from our personal opinions based on our own experiences. Whether you agree or disagree with what we say, feel free to share on the Spotify interactive tool. It's going to be plugged in, I guess, at the bottom of this episode, or on Instagram on the Wyland.podcast page for discussion. Trigger disclaimer. I want to give notice because I think some words in this conversation could overall bring up feelings or emotional distress, negative feelings or emotional distress, and we don't want that. So if you think there is a slight possibility, I encourage you to turn this off and check back when you've done something that makes you feel more grounded. So just want to say we appreciate the listens, but 1,000 times over, I want people to not listen and take care of ourselves first before anything. I went on the internet, good old Google, and this is directly from the CAMH, or the Center for Addictions and Mental Health website. I figured that it's a perfect place to grab a definition from. So trauma is a term used to describe the challenging emotional consequences that living through a distressing event can have for an individual. Traumatic events can be difficult to define because the same event may be more traumatic for some people than others. And so I spoke to a colleague of mine and a dear friend of mine. We touched base tonight. I hadn't spoken to her in a while, and she was like, "What are you up to?" We just sort of said, like, "How's it been going? I miss you," right? And I told her, I'm like, "Oh, I'm recording my first episode in like a really long time. I'm really excited. It's with Lucha's cousin. So I'm really looking forward to it." And I shared with her what it was that we were going to be talking about. And she was like, "Oh my God, this is a big topic. And it's amazing that you're getting together with somebody to discuss something that is so huge in the BIPOC community." And she shared with me a whole bunch of resources, a whole bunch of tools, a whole bunch of so many things we spoke about in 15 minutes. And she made a few recommendations. She's very, very well versed in this area of discussion, incredibly knowledgeable, and carries an immense amount of wisdom. And so she suggested that I also define historical multi-generational trauma. In addition to defining the term trauma, I want to define historical multi-generational trauma, which can also be known as trans trauma or intergenerational trauma. And I think it's fitting for this conversation because you are from the Dominican Republic. There is so many conversations that I've had with people that say, "Esa vaina no existe. De la depresión no existe, que da, 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 da." And
eso es mental.
Eso es mental. Oh my God. That's like the famous freaking line. So the term intergenerational trauma, also known as trans or multi-generational trauma, occurs when a traumatic event takes place to either an individual, family, or collective community and gets passed down to subsequent generations. It's a lot to unpack, but I think we can discuss it enough to have people be a little bit curious and explore for themselves, like, what experiences have I had that have led me to be traumatized or have even led me to have PTSD.
For sure. So I think that, trauma is a big, big thing that a lot of us don't realize that we are carrying. And we carry all this baggage and all this trauma. It might not have been just one trauma, it might be one trauma and then something else in a different aspect of our life. And especially in the Hispanic and the Dominican community, in the Latin community, it's like you said, it doesn't exist. It doesn't affect me. We try to portray this toughness, that I'm tough, I have everything under control, I do what I need to do on a daily basis. But then the question is, do you really have everything under control, right? Because sometimes we want to camouflage or we want to cover up our trauma, our hurts in different ways. We all need healing. We probably have all lived through trauma in one way or another. And one of the definitions and said, what it affects one person in one way that might have lived through a trauma might not affect the other person the same way. So therefore, we cannot compare. We cannot compare our trauma. We cannot compare our journey. We can't compare our healing because every person is different and everybody absorbs things differently. I always put an example of somebody, when you take a cut, when you have a cut, right, you start to bleed, you get a bandage, you put on the bandage to stop the bleeding and possibly so that it doesn't get infected. And if you leave that bandage for too many days, it probably will get infected or your finger will get, start oozing. And that's exactly what happens when we have trauma and when we have wounds and memories that we need healing from, but we just put a bandage on it. Whether that bandage might be, keeping busy, because keeping busy doesn't give you the opportunity to be able to think about those things and those thoughts that you do not want to think about, or being a workaholic and working all the time, or where it's partying, going to parties every single night. I have nothing against that, but when you use external things, materialistic things, just to get out of your thoughts and for you not to actually sit down and internalize your feelings, your thoughts, your experiences, and those gray areas or those dark areas in your life that you don't want others to see, we actually disservice ourselves. And we don't only disservice ourselves, but we disservice of those around us. So everybody listening, I respect everyone's opinion, but trauma is real and we all need healing, and it's up to you, it's up to me to make the decision to get on that path of healing, which might look different for you, which might look different for me. But the first step would be able to accept the fact that we each have an area in our life that needs to be healed and that we need help, and that we need to take action, that we can't leave it to others to offer us what we can only offer to ourselves. And sometimes in life, we're always blaming everybody else. We're always like, oh, pero fulano de tal, y fulano de tal, and this person. But when do we point the finger to us and see that the problem might not be the other person, but it might be the consequence to the hurt and the trauma that we have in our life? So I think to be able to address those areas. I saw a post the other day, and it's so true. It says, heal so you don't bleed on the people that did not hurt you. And that is like intense. That's very strong to read that, but it's the truth. Because we do bleed on our children, we do bleed on our husbands, we bleed on our family, we bleed on our co-workers, because sometimes we're carrying all this baggage, whether it was from childhood, whether if it even was, I've met with people, I've met with youth, given talks to youth where they knew that from their belly, like that they were an unwanted child. The damage and the trauma that causes to somebody that, as a mom, I mean, we're moms, we know that our children feel everything, right? So that also is a trauma that passes on. There's trauma of, people like in the Dominican Republic that they had to not go to school, they had to work, they had to tie tobacco. My mom was one of them. She didn't go to school. She was tying tobacco. She was carrying water because they had to go to the rivers at that time to get the water. She was maintaining the house, in los cafetales, making coffee. She had to do things at a very young age that right now, if a child would be told to do that, it would be like, tú estás abusando de ella. That's what was expected, and that is in itself traumatic, right? And later on, when we go through my personal experience, I'll share a little bit more of different situations that have led me to that healing process through trauma. But for everybody that's listening, I invite you to internalize what are the areas in your life that you feel that you need to be free from, that you need to heal, that you need to work on, and to be honest with yourself. Because at the end of the day, the longer, they say time heals all wounds. I personally do not believe in that, because it does not heal the root wound. It's just gonna, one day it's gonna explode into something bigger. So I'm not saying if we heal, it's a process, it's a journey, but we're always gonna have something to heal from. But if we at least start healing the roots, then that's an important part, because then anything after that, we're going to grow in resiliency. We're going to be able to deal with things differently, because we healed the major root of our trauma and our woundedness and the memories and, whatever it is that we're carrying.
So many thoughts as you were speaking. And I think one of the things that came to mind was the trauma that we experience as in childhood definitely plays out as an adult and into your children's lives. If you have children, like you said, you come and you plant something into your child or into your partner's mind or in the home environment, and then it grows and it festers and it gets people sick. Like trauma literally can get people sick. Think about this. And I really love that you said, internalize for your own self and think about that. And I encourage you to do that, because something that, again, you think might not be a trauma is. And, you do take it out on the people around you. Like I've had shit that I've had to deal with, and maybe Junior in a way like triggers an experience for me. And then I think about it afterwards and I'm like, shit, like maybe he didn't mean it that way. But that one word, like it could be a word, that one word really hurt me to the point where it triggered something in me that I don't even know myself what it is. So I think sitting with yourself and maybe, going through counseling, looking for resources, because there are resources out there that can support, even if it's like a half hour a week or something, trying to find those means to be able to begin that process.
And I think sometimes people have the means, but they just choose to use it in other things.
Yeah.
Right? That might give you a satisfaction in that moment, but then you're back to your reality, to being alone, you're back to your thoughts, you're back to your feelings. And that might be good for those few hours that you're having fun or whatever, but what happens next? Is that really contributing to your growth as a person, right? So there's so many resources, even online, like there's so much stuff, but it's just taking the time to invest it in ourselves. And that's something that I'm learning to do, in terms of investing an hour to yourself, half an hour, whatever it is, even 15 minutes, but internalizing, like, how was my day today? What did I do today? What could I work on? Why did I act this way? And when you were talking about the marriage, especially for me, I've been married now 10 years. It's not easy, because we both come from same background. We're both Dominican, but different upbringings. So it's like things that I would expect, because I see the way that I was raised, and he was raised, not with both parents. And not that that's a bad thing, but it also depends on the circumstances. So we did have to go through a lot of difficult circumstances. And sometimes, it's like the growing up happened later than it should have been, in certain ways, like emotionally. And it's because he never got that emotional and that mental, presence that he needed growing up. So sometimes that also makes us clash, right? Because I'm one way and I'm family oriented, I'm all for the family, and he supports that 100%, but the way that I carry myself is different than with the way that because he only has what he was given. Comes down to, you could only give what you have, right? Do I stay there and use that as an excuse, right? Or do you work on it like he has, right? Do I use my past as an excuse, or I live through this and also victimize myself because I went through the trauma, because whatever it might look like for you, whoever's listening, or do I do something about it now? And sometimes, like you said, it could be counseling, right? It could be talking to a friend that's going to actually listen and hear you out. It could be talking to a priest or a pastor. It could be talking to yourself, to be honest, and being honest with yourself and journaling. Like I know a lot of people that journal because that helps them just express their thoughts, and being able to kind of determine, this me lashing out from this is because maybe this, right? And being able to put things into perspective. Healing is hard work, and it doesn't happen from one day to the next. Like you said, there's some things that are also generational. There's a lot of patterns. Sometimes we'll get into the after when we speak about the boundaries that we absorb, that gives us an expectation that we need to live up to, because we're good people, or because we like to service, or because what we do for others is what defines us. In reality, that's not the way that it is. But the healing part is so important. There's so many broken people out there that all they need is somebody to listen, and all they need is somebody, like you said, through this podcast. Maybe somebody was going to hear it and they're going to say, "Wow, this is exactly what I needed." Listening to people that have lived through those processes and trauma, and to whatever extent, it makes it more real. It makes it more, well, if so and so is dealing with this and is doing this, or so and so got through it, then I can too, right? And it gives you hope, in moments where you're in despair. So healing, again, it's hard work, but nobody else can do it for you.
I was thinking about this the other day. I have an estranged relationship with my dad. My dad raised me like I was a daddy's girl. I'm the firstborn in my family. I'm the oldest. There's three of us. My dad and I had the closest relationship, like the things that you see on Instagram, like the cute dads with their daughters, or like in the movies of the cute dads and their daughters, or like I posted something today about a dad. He saw his daughter getting kind of like bullied or pushed around by another girl in like her ballet class, and her dad was like, beat her ass, like do this to her the next time she tries to mess with you. And it's that was my relationship with my dad. And so it's interesting that we're talking about this, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, like about him and my relationship with him. And I feel like a lot of my anger, a lot of my resentment comes from that, because I haven't been able to, I'm such a crybaby, because I haven't been able to deal with that. And it's again like festering, and it's just como que it takes over you as a human, and it starts to define who you are as an individual. It seeps into the pores of everything else that you're involved in, especially your family, right? Or even your partner. I'm so grateful we're having this conversation around the times that I've been thinking about it for some months now. And yeah, it's hard. It is really hard work. Like you said, healing is hard, and I'm like, oh my God, that should be like on a shirt or something because it's so true. And I feel it's in so few words you're able to grasp something that is so deep. It is hard work, but when you start to feel good, like I think, moved on from certain things that I've experienced in life. But then this one thing, like my relationship with my dad, is something that is incredibly challenging for me to, I think, move on from, or not move on from, but be able to move on, not with my life. I don't know. It's like I'm stuck thinking about how things ended between us and why we're in the situation that we're in now, like why we have the relationship that we have now. Um, and I'm like, okay, like I need to address this, but I'm kind of stuck on how to do that because I've never been in this situation before, right? Like, how do you heal from knowing your parent is alive and is well and is successful and does all sorts of cool things with their life, but also they have a new family, new kids outside of you, your brother and your sister. Now it's like, I don't know. It's complicated.
I personally think that, again, it's that action, and that healing is for yourself. It's not for him. it's for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. So I remember, so my husband's mom was diagnosed with cancer a year before our wedding, in 2012. I still remember that call when I was driving. I remember the street. I was on a Dixon Road, and I had to pull over because she just flat out called me and told me I have 95% I have cancer, breast cancer. Turns out that the month after, we drove over there to the States, and they did her mastectomy. She had pretty much stage 4 cancer. In a year's time, she had about 45 sessions of chemo and radiation. And as I mentioned before, my husband grew up between his mom and his dad, like just no stability really. And I noticed when he moved here, he wasn't as like I am with my mom, or like atento and all that stuff. And sometimes, our parents don't realize the lack of things, not things, materialistic things, the lack of time, the lack of love, the lack of attention, the lack of being there emotionally, how that affects somebody else, right? Mm-hmm. So I told him one time, like, you know what? Sometimes our parents are not going to be the one, especially in that generation, and especially in the Latin community, that are going to come and say, "Mira, mijo, discúlpame." It's not going to happen. So I told him, I'm like, you know what? I'm not a psychologist, but let's use reverse psychology, right? So I told him, I'm like, your mom has cancer. We don't know, how things are going to roll out. Why don't you open up the conversation? Why don't you say, I'm sorry for whatever it is, right? And I remember that day clearly, and she said, the one that's supposed to say sorry is me. That's it. That's all she said. But that was the start of a new relationship for them. And since that time, my husband had to heal his stuff, but also grew closer with her, and felt that by saying that and by hearing that, it gave him something that he needed to be able to move on, right? And it's sometimes we're waiting for the other person to take the action, but that person might never. And then meanwhile, we are hurting ourselves even more, waiting and expecting from somebody, like I said, that cannot give us what they don't have, right? So I would definitely encourage you to reach out and say, and you're gonna feel like in el aire. You're gonna feel relieved. You're gonna feel like you did this for you did this for your family, you did this for your kids, you did this for Junior, because at the end of the day, like you said, it festers, and then we don't know, right, what tomorrow holds. And if God forbid anything were to happen, then you're left with I should have and I didn't.
Oh yeah, I think about that too all the time. Yeah.
We're talking about generational stuff here. Like my mother was not raised fully by my grandparents. She was raised in el campo. She was raised by my great grandmother, que en paz descanse, and she grew up with the lack of, again, a lot of stuff. Back home, I don't know if it's only Dominican, but back home in those times, they only cared if you slept and if you ate. That's it. There was no emphasis on, mira, te quiero mucho, I love you. I tell my kids I love you 10 times a day.
Me too.
And they're like, I already know. I'm like, yes, but I'm going to keep telling you. So it's like, they didn't do that. They didn't give emphasis into that stuff, right? So anyways, my mom grew up. She got pregnant with me. My mom got married when she was 17. Then she came here when she was about 20. She had me about 21 or so. And she was very resented towards my grandparents, while she was pregnant with me. So obviously she didn't have a present mom, and an affectionate mom. So she basically me tuvo y me pudo dar lo que ella pudo, right? And I don't blame her for that. And I've never I understand an adult and as a mother, but I know that she lived through that trauma of needing her mom and her mom not being there, and then having to learn to give me things that were not given to her, right? And passing to me that void that she had, the void of love, right? That void where a lot of people listening might have, but just don't realize it because they're filling it up with things that they think are really going to make them happy, but that could se pueden desaparecer. That generational stuff that we were talking about, yes, it's things that get passed on. And for those, I am Catholic, so I am going to share a little bit about this, but in the Bible it says 5 generations, so it could be passed on 5 generations. So somebody 5 generations before you had whatever it is, whatever trauma, cualquier cadena, cualquier cosa, it could pass on to you. So why not cut? You know, why we're the responsible? Porque a veces uno dice, oh, eso corre en la familia. There's something, a post that I saw. It runs in the family until it ran into me, because we make the decision that what do we want to do, right? My mom went through that process. She did, you know, her healing process. Her faith helped her a lot. And now, you know, her and my grandmother, they live together. Like, you know, she's the caregiver for them. We are all caregivers for them. But at the end of the day, it was my decision. What did I do to, so that I don't go on with that to my kids?
And so, yeah, you said something about, you referenced the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about an indigenous worldview. It's 7 generations. So it's very close, very similar. 7 generations before and 7 generations after. And it also made me think about blood memory. And it also made me think about science. So I know that the food that my grandmother ate and the traumas that she's had get passed down to these things, the eggs that she was already born with and carrying, right? Like she was born, my mom's mom was born with my mom already in her body physically. And with my mom being in her body physically, as an egg, I was already there too. And so were my siblings. And so I think about those things and I'm like, there's so much evidence around this, but there's not that much education about it. Like they don't teach us this in school. They don't talk about this in school. And I think also about truly how that impacts us without us even knowing. I can relate because my mom left Nicaragua when she was 15. She had just turned 15. And I think about what type of life she had before she left, the things that she shares with me or has shared with me. And then todo lo que le tocó when she moved to the States. My mom went to Mexico and then ended up in California. She lived in Los Angeles, and that's where my parents met. And then I think about my dad, and I'm like, holy sheesh. My dad left when he was really young, like he wasn't even 10 years old, and went to go live with his brother. And he was the baby out of all the siblings. And my mom was the oldest. So my mom felt the sense of responsibility. My mom isn't as affectionate with me as I am with my kids. Like you said, like, oh, I love you 10 times, 15 times a day. Que la beba me dice también, I know, mom. And I think I see like, wow, the way that I loved Alex as he's been growing, he now is that way with me. You know, like he'll come and he'll tell me, I love you, mom. I love you, mom. And he'll come and he'll be like, can I have a hug? And he'll just hug me, you know, or he'll give me a kiss on the cheek. And it's like, I laugh to myself sometimes because I'm like, oh, okay, like I know my son feels loved. You know, I know Beba does too, also, obviously. But with him now being 15, I can see how the way that I was towards him as he was growing has impacted him today in these years, you know, when we think like, oh, when we're teenagers, like we don't want the affection and the attention of our parents, you know, like he still wants his personal time and he still likes to do his thing. But I get that, those moments of affection from him. And I think to myself, like, I was never like that with my mom. I was never like that with my mom. I was sometimes like that with my dad because my dad was a little bit more nurturing in that sense. And it's interesting because you would think that it's the moms that are more nurturing, right? Like typically that's what I hear a lot more of. But now it's kind of, the roles have sort of switched now that I'm an adult. Like my mom is, you know, a little bit more affectionate, and I don't know, and I think to myself sometimes, are you learning by watching me with Beba and Alex?
Me too. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. And she said, there's been times where she said, you know, I should have given you guys more. Mm-hmm. But she realizes again, because not in a bad way. And like I told her, like, you know, we're here, right? But it's what she sees with me and my daughter and my son, right? But then also proud of us because
Yes.
at the same time we didn't let that be an excuse and continue
Right.
that into our kids. Even my husband as well, he's the same, affectionate to both of them, gives them time, gives them the space that they need, gives them that affection that they need and that attention that he didn't have, right? So not that he didn't have it, but like he didn't have it to the extent he needed it, right? And for again, the history of his parents, like where do they come from? How were they raised? You know, it all is like it's one thing after another, like it's a chain, right? It's crazy how that healing journey leads into our life and our roles today as mothers and as fathers and whatever role that the listeners have in their day-to-day life, how the healing journey really reflects in so many things. The way that we speak, the way that we deal with stress, the how we deal with situations and unexpected situations. We've had quite a bit of losses in our family, one after another, and it's been literally like one trial after something else. How do we deal with that if we're already hurt? But if we're healed, we're still hurting for whatever loss we have, for whatever situation, but we're able to confront it with more strength and with more resiliency because we have gone through the path that we've already gone through, right? So one thing builds into the next. I have a lot of people that tells me, "Oh, you're so strong." No, I'm not. It's that the experiences and the hurt and the things that I have lived through and that I have been able to, rely personally like on God for that strength versus relying on somebody else that has their own stuff, right? Like why go to somebody else? And I like talking, but I'm like, if the source for me personally, right, is God and just talking and give me the strength that I need. If that's the source, why am I going to go elsewhere? If that's the source for me, right? That might be a source of something else for somebody else, right? But for me, that's what helps me, right? So it's definitely, like I said, healing is hard work.
Yeah. And I like that you emphasize your faith and how I guess you found your pillar in figuring out more or less what you need in order to heal and what you need in order to break that cycle and have it end with you and your husband, right? And not let that, I guess, lead into the lives of your children so much. And so healing, I know that for me, in my opinion, I don't think it's linear. But do you think that it's possible to be on a healing journey and also thrive in other aspects of your life and move forward with life in other ways?
I think you could move forward in life if you're on a healing journey, but then to the extent that you move forward, I think that is the difference. Because I think that if you're in the healing process, there's always going to be something to obviously work on. But like I said before, there's a chunk of it, especially during our childhood and our upbringing, that affects us so much that with you not addressing that, you could only go so far. Because eventually you're gonna feel stuck. You're gonna feel like there's just something not right. Like I've met people that have a good job, that are successful, that have a family, but they're empty. They feel sad all the time. They're depressed, but they have everything. Materialistically, they have everything, and they're not able to pinpoint why they feel a certain way. And when they open up, there's trauma. There's things that they haven't spoken to out of fear, maybe sometimes out of fear of judgment,
Shame,
things that they have done, things that they have said, things that people have done to them. So you could move forward, but then it's to the extent that you're willing also to put in that work in your healing journey in the process. Because if we focus so much on the day-to-day, the busyness like that this country has of go all the time, there's no time.
Yeah.
But it's so important to take the time
To prioritize it. Yeah.
and have those boundaries in place so that you're able to be on the healing journey, but be parallel to where you're heading in life, right? But you can't have the healing journey not happening and just paralyzed, and then moving forward, because then you're gonna eventually be stuck, because it's gonna come out, that lack of healing or the lack of addressing XYZ in different ways. Like you mentioned before, there's sometimes words Junior uses that trigger you, right? Same thing. There's people. I had a manager one time. He was such a horrible manager. He's very micromanaging, kind of wanted to take control of everybody, and I could clearly see that it was somebody who was very unloved and very unsatisfied with their life, and being the title of a manager made him feel more powerful, and made him have meaning, right? And that's another thing that we said, we're not professional, but with my faith God has given me the gift to be able to see things through my experience, but then through his light at the same time. And this in the ways that I'm perfect, but me ha dado la sabiduría de poder mirar al corazón instead of the person. And also through the process of my life and the things that I have lived through, giving me, and that, I think that's why I'm always like giving and giving and giving, is because me ha enseñado a tener más empatía, to be more empathetic, to be more compassionate. So I feel more. So my heart aches more when somebody else is going through somebody. And sometimes, like, why do you care so much? It's just me, because that's one, like, my family is like that too. It's just, I'm a giver. And then 3, it's the empathy that I feel also, I've learned, because I lacked it as well. It's crazy. Like, it's a gift, and it could be a curse.
Yeah. I can. So I was just going to say that. I was going to say, as you were speaking, I'm like, it's empathy. Like, you're empathetic, and you can understand why he is the way, or people are the way that they are. And sometimes you just have to spend a little moment with them, and you can sort of get a sense for, damn, like, what did you go through that has created this, either a wall that you put up, that people put up, or como una máscara, right? And instead of allowing yourself to feel vulnerable, sometimes as an individual, we often do the put on that mask, because there's so much more that we're hiding, and there's so much pain behind that. And it could also be shame. It could be a lot of things, right? And yeah, I can totally see that, because I think I've been in a similar situation where I've had like a boss who was micromanaging me at one point, and any idea I would bring to the surface to the team was like shut down right away. Like, nope, nope, nope. And it got to the point where and I think this is where maybe we go into the topic of boundaries now, because it sounds like a perfect segue. Because then it got to the point where I really started questioning my ability, my skill. Like, I was like, what the frig am I doing here then? Why was I hired to be in this role? Were you just looking to fill this role? Were you just hoping to have the body there and say, all right, the role's been filled, we don't have to worry about any more. Ya me puedo quitar eso off of my to-do list. Figure it out. Like, you have me do really simple tasks versus participating in the capacity that I thought to be capable of, that I thought I was hired for. And it got to the point where I was like, why am I even here? After thinking about it a little bit, and after talking to some people, they sort of pointed out a few things for me, like the type of personality that other individual had. And I was like, okay, I'm not the only one who sees that. It's not just me, and it's like you mentioned, it also comes into our workspace when we have shit that we don't deal with, that we don't address, and we don't confront it, and we just sort of run away from it. And it's interesting, you said like you become a workaholic because that person was workaholic. There was no bending, there was no flexibility. And now I think about it and I'm like, how come I didn't realize it sooner, that I needed to sort of put up that boundary of, okay, I'm not going to allow for my work life to affect me, because it was getting to the point where it was affecting me mentally, and I was bringing it home with me, and I was stressing it at home, and I was like upset and frustrated with myself. And so I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to have this be something that deters me from continuing on the path that I'm on, when it comes to my career, because I genuinely enjoyed what I was doing. And I'll let it be for a bit, and then I'll pick it back up when I'm ready, and I'll figure out what I can do better.
I think, like you said, like the boundaries, it's so important. And in the healing process, after you go through that healing process, through the painful and lengthy healing process, the hard work and the experiences that you live and you continue to live during that healing journey, with deception, with expecting from people, not getting nothing in return, from being a giver, like myself, and learning the hard way that not just because you give doesn't mean you're gonna. I mean, I give not expecting in return, but sometimes common courtesy,
Right.
is like important as well. And not saying yes. I used to say yes to everything. My husband would tell me, like, you're overworking yourself, and I would say, you don't understand, like, you don't. But then now I see things different as I've been continuing in my healing journey, where yes, I've had to put walls up. I have to stop. I've had to learn to stop sharing personal things with people around me, because invalidation, the comparing, well, so and so and so and so. I don't care about so and so. I'm talking about my experience. I'm talking about the situation I'm living in. If so and so got great, but it's not the same, because I am me and that person was them, right? So I've had to learn to, not answer the phone call if I'm not emotionally or mentally in that space to do so for whatever reason. I have learned to let go of people that I used to say yes to all the time, to the point like people were promoting me. Oh, if you have any problem, just call Joli. She'll help you resolve it. Like, literally.
Oh my gosh.
And mind you, I have my marriage, I have my 2 kids, I have my parents. My mom had a heart attack last summer. My losses in our family, situations that come up like unexpectedly, and a lot going on. My close family, which is my response, like my home, like my parents. Those are aside from my marriage and my kids, there's my parents, right, and my grandparents. So it's a lot. So I've had to learn to shut people off, not isolate totally, but have a balance in between what is good for me and what is not, what gives me peace and what takes away my peace, and protects my mental, my spiritual peace. Because also, the enemy, the devil, you call it whatever you want to call it, is always looking to where to stick their nose. And sometimes it's where it's going to hurt you the most.
Yeah.
And it just, but God is so good that at the end of the day, even in the moment it's pain, then I'm like, like, I'm going to take this as a lesson for this, right? And I'm going to take this because that experience just showed me that I need to pull more back from this person, because this person acted this way. So it's like, let me pull back even further. And then it's not that you change, it's that you grow.
Right.
It's not that, fulano cambió. No.
Right.
It's that fulano ha madurado, ha crecido. You've grown as a person, you've grown as a wife, you've grown as an individual, you've grown as a mother, and you know that you have to protect your space. Because if you don't protect it, nobody else is going to protect it. So that boundary setting has been hard for me, because that's something also that I've absorbed through my parents, right? And I appreciate, like, those are the values. Like, I'm all for my family, I love my family, and I'm there in a second, whoever needs me. But then I've also like pinpoint who does things, who's gonna be there in the good and the bad, and who does things that va a sacar provecho, right? Or who I can speak to through things that I'm going through personally. Sometimes it's not even family that I feel comfortable with, right? And sometimes it is. Like, it just all depends on the situation. But I've learned to keep things to myself sometimes, con el temor de que lo que vayan a decir me vaya a hacer más daño que bien, or the judgment or the opinions. So we grow and we learn that boundaries are healthy, and that the self-love that we give, because now everybody's self-love is go to the spa, go shopping, go this. But the biggest gift that you could give yourself as self-love is your healing. Because if you heal your mind, if you heal your spirit, then everything else will come on its own. I see a lot of people, and I'm all for it, going to the gym, go to the gym 10 times, whatever you want a week. That's fine. I'm all for that. Eat healthy. But please do not forget that your mind and your heart is way more important than that. So you have to have a balance.
For
I
sure.
always say, if you have like 4 chairs if you have a chair with 4 legs and one is missing, you're gonna fall.
Exactly.
And that's exactly it. Because you could look a certain way and you could do your focus, and I understand that helps a lot of people mentally. But then how's your heart?
Right.
And everything radiates from there.
That is so true. You mentioned so many things. You always say so much. Like you say so much with few words, and my brain just starts like thinking. You mentioned family and even having to set up boundaries with people that at one point you were really close with, I'll say, because I've had a recent experience like that. And it's just sort of like I tried to reach out, I tried to address the problem, I tried to nurture that relationship. And I was like, oh, hell no. It got to a point where they deflected completely from my attempts. They, ignored them. And then se querían pasar como que nada había pasado. Como que we hadn't spoken and we didn't speak in like a few months. And then all of a sudden they wanted to have a conversation with me. And I'm like, this is where I'm going to put that up. And, I think it's important to do that because we need to realize, like, at what point do we prioritize ourselves? At what point do we say, no, es suficiente? After having conversations with, those relatives or friends or whoever and already establishing with them, if they're around you long enough or they're close to you, they should know, like, esta persona no tolera ciertas cosas. I know that they're like this and I respect it. And
sometimes they do and sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they don't.
I've had the same experience sometimes with the same person. And until the last thing that happened, I'm like, there is no, I even had to hang up on this person.
Oh, man.
Because it was during a stressful situation in the family and I didn't have the right mind to be que me tuvieran trayendo cosas that didn't have to do with the case. So it's like, it was such a it hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Me decepcioné. But then I learned, I'm like, the only one que no me va a decepcionar is God, literally, because nobody's perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, you have to stop expecting from people that do not have anything to give you. And people might think materialistically, and it's not. It's just the attention, the care, the validation, the listening, is just so much. And siempre hay una excusa, right? Like, oh, no estaba bien en la mente, that I was thinking about something else, or I don't know what I was thinking, and I'm sorry. But sometimes I'm sorry is not enough.
Right.
Especially when you've hurt so much.
Right.
On different scenarios. And it's not that you stop loving that person. It's not that you stop, interacting with that person. But maybe the relationship is not the same, or it's not going to be the same.
Loving them from a distance.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's loving them from a distance and also being there, not ignoring, but loving them from where they are.
Right.
In their life, in their journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes these are people that think that they're totally fine.
Yeah.
They're very proud of themselves. They carry a lot of pride. So when you call them out on something, they're gonna push back. Right?
But guess what that is?
That's where the devil works too and starts, Joli, I know you love your family. I know how you are, so let me attack you through there and see what you're going to do and what your reaction is going to be. I posted this the other day. It says, too many people think unconditional love means unconditional tolerance. You can love someone to the moon and back and still have boundaries. Boundaries don't diminish the amount of love you have in your heart. And that's the thing. People visualize my family, not just me, like my parents, my sister, myself. So giving, that they think they could do anything to us and we're just going to be there smiling.
Right.
Right? So it's like, no. We respect ourselves. We respect as a family. Like, that is not just because we go to church, just because we have our faith does not mean that we're just going to be here and being stepped on, and that our boundaries and our thoughts and our feelings are not going to be respected, or the situation that we're going through is not going to be respected. So I've had to put, no word of a lie, I had somebody call me 10 times one time because they wanted me to book them an appointment somewhere while I was at work, okay? And they would call me through WhatsApp, and they would call me through regular call, and I did not pick up.
Oh my gosh.
And I knew that I was to service something, to do them something, because they never call me, right? So it was like, the audacity that people have sometimes, like, oh, Joli siempre va a estar disponible. Like, I have my own stuff, right?
Of course.
I have my own stuff. I have my husband too with his his family stuff that sometimes I have to help with, right? And it's like, I can't be everywhere and I can't be everything to everybody.
Right.
So that boundary setting is something that if I'm tired, like Carlos is an amazing dad and husband, and I appreciate that so much that he knows when I've had a rough day emotionally or mentally, I'm like, okay, I'm going to bed. I just go. Like, I need to be in bed by 8 to wake up at 5. That's what I'm going to do. Because I need that mental space. I need that space to be able to shut off my brain for a little bit and not think that I have to do this or the so-and-so this, and then all these thoughts start racing because you can't think straight. And then if your kids need you, tú estás de mal humor because you're tired and you've had a stressful day and you can't take it on them because it's obviously not their fault. But then you realize, I know when I am to my tolerance level, and then when I need to just push myself away to be able to recuperate for the next day. But I do that, it's because it's my kids. Because no matter how tired I am, or mentally or physically, whatever, emotionally, whatever it is, they are ellos me impulsan, right? They impulse me to be better, and to be better, I need to take time for myself. Right? And to be a better wife, I need to take care of myself and stop doing things for other people and looking for other people, because that's another thing. I would tell, hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? Always atrás de, and then I had to stop. Like, if they miss me, they'll call me, they'll text me, right? Like, it's just like, why does it always have to be me? Right? Why does it always have to be me reaching out? Why does it always have to be, and it's crazy because, like I said, I love my family, and we're such an extended family, like both from the Caba side and the Fernandez side, they're huge. So it's like sometimes you like lose track of who you've spoken to and who you haven't. But it's like you were saying, like Junior, I don't see him all the time, but somehow a message here and there, and when we see each other, it's like we always see each other, right? Because that love and the genuine relationship we have is there, right? And it unites us. And sometimes there's people that I see more often, but maybe that's not there. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so different, especially when you have such a big family. But at the end of the day, family is family. I would do everything for family. But I have to put boundaries.
All right. So this is where I think we're going to take a moment to have a pause so that we can try to process and really take in everything that has been shared so far. Joli started off the conversation talking about different ways she has seen trauma, intergenerational trauma, family experiences that her parents had growing up, how it has impacted her as a mother, as a woman of faith, and in how she walks in her life now. So I think it's a really great way to start us off. But I also want to have the opportunity for myself even to take it in. So we are going to divide this episode into 3 segments. This is going to be part 1 of 3, and we will pick up next week. Thanks for lending us your ears, and see you in the next episode.